Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on the basics of inheritance in Java. In this lesson, I'll introduce you to the concept of inheritance, what it is, and why it's useful. I'll also show you how to make a subclass and discuss the differences between a subclass and a superclass. Let's get started. Suppose we want to write a program that creates an online store. To do so, we need a class that represents items for sale in the store. Let's call that class storeItem. This class will have 5 instance variables. First, a string called SKU, which will be used as an ID for the item. Then, 2 more strings called name and description. And lastly, 2 integers called price and weight. We're making the item's price an integer just to keep things simple. Let's also add a public constant called shipping cost per pound to represent how much we'll charge per pound to ship any store item. Now let's add a constructor. In this constructor, we'll be passed values for the 5 instance variables. We also need 5 accessor methods, one for each instance variable. Let's add just one mutator method, a setPrice method that changes the item's price. For now, we won't provide a way to change the other instance variables. Now let's add a few more methods. First, we'll add a getCost method. This method will return the cost of having one of those store items shipped to you. The cost of the item is its price plus its shipping cost, which is the weight multiplied by the shipping cost per pound. Sometimes people will order duplicates of a particular item. Let's add another version of the getCost method that will calculate the cost when several of those store items are purchased. Our store wants to encourage people to buy lots of items, so we'll only charge shipping for one item. That means the total cost is the quantity ordered times the price plus the weight multiplied by the shipping cost per pound. We can eliminate a bit of code in our first version of getCost by having it call our second version of that method and passing 1 as the quantity. Remember, when you invoke a method within another method like this, the second method gets called on the same object that the first method was invoked on. The reference to that object is called this. We could emphasize this fact by putting this dot here, but I won't bother doing that. Since we have multiple versions of the getCost method, we say that that method has been overloaded. Now let's add just one more method to our class, a toString method. We'll have the toString method return a string containing all the store item's instance variable values, each separated by a new line. Let's quickly test this class over in main by creating an instance of the storeItem class and invoking the getCost and toString methods on it. Remember, the toString method is invoked automatically on a reference when that reference is passed in a print statement. Okay, let's see what we get. Good, so it looks like the cost was calculated correctly, and the toString method gave us a nice detailed description of the object we created. With the storeItem class, we can list a bunch of different products to sell in our online store. Toasters, shampoo, computers, whatever. But suppose our online store also wants to sell books. And books are indeed store items. They have a price, a name, a weight, and all that stuff, but they also differ from normal store items in a couple of ways. For example, unlike other store items, books have authors. And they also have much lower shipping costs than normal store items. Because of these small differences, we want to make book its very own class. Let's do that. Now remember, a book is a special type of store item. It has the same properties as any other store item, with just a few differences and additions. Since a book is a store item, this class needs to have all the variables and methods that were included in the store item class. We could, of course, do that by simply copying and pasting all that code from the store item class over into this class, but that would be a terrible idea. If we did that, our program would have lots of code duplicated in two different places. That makes the program much longer than it needs to be, and makes it much harder to maintain and modify the program in the future. So instead, we want to somehow indicate that this book class has all the variables and methods of the store item class without actually copying them into this class. We can do that with the extends keyword, like this. Believe it or not, with these two simple words, we have essentially added all of store item's instance variables and methods to the book class. This process of adding instance variables and methods to a class by extending another class is called inheritance. In this case, we say the book class inherits from the store item class. In these inheritance relationships, we call the class that acquires the other class's properties the subclass or child class. Book is the subclass in this case. And we call the class that the properties were acquired from the parent or superclass. Store item is the parent class in this case. Okay, let's see how all this works. Remember, even though they're not listed here, the book class now has the same 5 instance variables as the store item class. Those instance variables need to be initialized. But child classes do not inherit constructors from their parent, so the book class currently has no constructors. So we need to add a constructor here. Let's add one that takes the same parameters as the constructor in the store item class. All we want to do in this constructor body is to initialize the instance variables, SKU, name, description, and so on. The easiest way to do that is to have the book constructor call this constructor in store item. A subclass can call its superclasses constructor with the super keyword, like this. Now, when this line of code executes, this constructor code over here will execute. Now let's go over to main and make a book object. Then we'll call the getCost method on it. Make sure you understand why this worked. Remember, the book class doesn't have any methods listed, yet we were able to call the getCost method on a book object. That's because book inherits from store item, so all the methods listed in store item are available to book objects. This is one reason why inheritance is such a powerful programming tool. It allows us to share variables and methods among classes without having to duplicate their code. And that wraps up this lesson on the basics of inheritance in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.